This is the first country that we've chosen to live in. Like, we're like, where do we want to settle? Where do we want to be? And so I grew up in America, spent about 15 years in Washington, D.C., where I was an activist and lobbyist against genocide and for a more effective United Nations. My husband, Philip, and I had a long-time dream of doing a sailboat adventure. When I was about 38, we decided to get on a sailboat. We bought a sailboat and spent 2 years in the East Coast of the United States and then all around the Caribbean with our 2 cats at the time. So eventually we had enough of that. He had enough of that, more accurately. And I ended up in a job in Thailand, working with the United Nations in Southeast Asia, across Southeast Asia. And then a great job came up working on child marriage in London. And so we ended up spending about 10 years there. You know, I've lived in 7 countries, and each time it was because it was like an exchange or a job. Very often the job was taking me around the world. About 6 or 7 years ago, we started doing trips to Portugal, and we were just like, oh my gosh, this is just lovely. We really want to live here. The people are wonderful. The way of life is so much slower, and the weather's great. Like that, not a small part of it, like after London. So we ended up here. Some of it was we were really looking for somewhere that wasn't the hectic life of London, the noise and the dirt and the weather. I actually am fluent in French because I've lived in Belgium and France. And originally I thought we'd be going, you know, somewhere in France. But Portugal is honestly just much more welcoming to immigration. Like, to be honest, it's a place that has said, yeah, actually, please come. For folks like me, that's not a small thing. Like, having done so many immigrations, like, people complain about the immigration process here. It's like every country. Immigration is difficult and hard. But the UK has decided there's a hostile environment, right? They make it hostile. They actually make it unpleasant. And Portugal is very welcoming. The quality of life here is very high. It's a small country, and that makes a difference. It's a country that's not full of itself, right? People are warm and welcoming. For a European country, it's exceptionally warm and welcoming. Like, I found that most of Western Europe tends to be a little more closed. But in Portugal, you can get in a conversation with someone, right, that you don't know. It's not America where all of a sudden you're best friends, but it is very open as a society for a European country. And just the fact that, you know, in an afternoon you might go to a kiosk and just have an imperial or a coffee and just sit in the sun, and that's okay. Like, it's not rushed. Very easy place to live. People talk about the bureaucracy, but there's bureaucracy everywhere. Mm-hmm. There are issues everywhere. And in my experience, it's just a little more human than some places. And it's funny because, like, you think about it as like, okay, it's slow. It doesn't feel like, I've been to many countries where life is really slow, like the Caribbean, right? Like, life is actually really laid back and slow. So it's not as laid back as some places, but it is very peaceful, and there's not a lot of drama, which is really nice. And it's kind. Like, people are kind. It was interesting because we were actually looking in Grassa and kind of up north a bit. Much more, and one of the main things that we wanted was to be off a flight path, because in London we were on the Heathrow flight path the entire time we were there, and just the plane, so we like rolled out Estrela. We were kind of looking up at the neighborhoods there, and when we were first looking, so we did a couple trips where we just walked around Lisbon. Like, we were doing 20 kilometers a day up and down hills, just got to know a few of the neighborhoods, and we saw this place. I said to Gonzalo, I'm like, well, let's give it a go. Like, we hadn't thought about living in the Baixa because it is such a tourist destination, and we thought it would be noisy, right? We thought, okay, this is going to be a place that'll be like really noisy at night. We came down here and we walked into this apartment, and it was just so peaceful. It feels like you're in a Parisian apartment is part of it. Like, it's very European. It's not done up in that way that people sometimes do, where they modernize everything and they rip out the good bones. Like, it's still got all the good bones. And we wanted a place that needed a little work, because we really like working on houses. Like it's like one of the things that we do. Like we had a boat for a while and we work on that, but we renovated a 1909 house in Washington ourselves. We had some help to do things like remove the bathtub and put up the walls, but we absolutely fell in love with this place. And I've just fallen in love with living in the Baixa because there are only 900 people who live in this entire area, which is unfortunate because like we don't have as many neighbors as we would. Like a lot of it's businesses and hotels, but it's so central and so easy to get to and from. But also like there's such street life. Like during the day it's vibrant and there are people around and you feel like you're in a European city, but then everything just shuts down at 11 o'clock at night and it becomes silent. So my job is full on, right? And I don't have a lot of time to be researching things and figuring things out. And I had gone on some of the Facebook groups and lists and looked for a good real estate agent, and I was not even getting callbacks. And I think that's true for a lot of people because estate agents are in great demand. I stumbled across Goldcrest and set up a free call, and I was like, oh, these people get it. Like they understand that this is a lot of work and I just need a little bit of help. The other point, apart from just having someone like super professional who knows the market, was that knowing the market, was the fact that there's a team of folks who can help say, actually, this place is overpriced. Or there were times where we pick an apartment and Gonzalo was like, you're not gonna like the neighborhood. And I was like, well, let's just go. We've got time. We spent a week, we spent two full weeks looking at places here, and we'd get there and it'd be a absolutely gorgeous apartment at a really great price with a big road outside, right? Yeah. And dirty and just, so it was like some of that real attentiveness to us and our needs and the understanding that like we weren't actually looking for a place that was fully renovated, already had air conditioning, new appliances. That wasn't the thing we were looking for. We were looking for atmosphere, and we were looking for a project, sort of being willing to both work with our needs, but then also push us and say, have you thought about doing this instead? And then we also just had a real connection with Gonzalo. Like he was easy to work with. He was so responsive. I think that actually the fact that we were paying for services, right? Like it was very clear that we put down an amount of money and then we were the clients, right? It wasn't just like you're gonna get more if you get a more expensive apartment. Like I was able to enter it knowing that I had someone on my side who saw their job as me as just a client and not just someone that there was one transaction, that there was a more longer term. It was so simple. Right. And I think that Gonzalo and the team at Goldcrest had a lot to do with that. Like we found a place, we made an offer. They hooked us up with trusted lawyers who handled the back end. Mm-hmm. And there were certain things like on our street in the Baixa, you actually can't park. You can't reserve a space for delivery. But we didn't know that. We were having things shipped over. And Gonzalo actually arranged for a permit, arranged for the police to be here. Now, the police didn't say, actually, you're not allowed to do that there. They took the fee and then didn't do it. But Gonzalo was on the phone that morning, right, with everyone saying, why aren't you here? Like they're having their things delivered. And this was long after the sale, right? Even though there were things that didn't go right, which happens in every move internationally, like you're gonna have things not go right. I felt like I had someone on my side who was, and I'm ashamed to say I don't speak Portuguese yet, still working on it. But this is one of the first places I've moved where that was a real big impediment. Because it was either English is the working language of most people. I was fluent in French. So I was able to like negotiate the systems. And here I couldn't negotiate the systems on my own. And having someone who could just get on the phone and solve those problems for me was incredibly helpful. I didn't have to think about it, right? I just said, okay, yeah, this will get taken care of. Drop in Gonzalo a line and it was done. I got a paper, I signed it, I sent it back, and things happened, right? And that was the nice part from my side, because like I said, my job is really heavy and I travel a lot for work. So sometimes I'll be 8 time zones away or 12 time zones away and just like not able to even respond that day. But it was actually fairly simple. We're still working on it. So the place, so it's a Pombaline building, so it's very old. It had been, I think, in the Philip knows this better, but it had been like a rooming house for a while. And then it was a glove factory of all things. And then the people who'd lived here previous to us for 20 years or something, they were an architect and an artist, and they did not do a lot to it. So a lot of the original character was still there. So we still have some of the ceiling moldings and the doors. And coming in, we actually haven't done a whole lot yet. We've fixed some of the floorboards. It's interesting because the inspector came in. So it's all like, it's in incredible condition. The bones are there. And so far, all we've really been able to do is fix up a little and paint a little. But we're just getting started on like thinking about the kitchen and the bathrooms. Some of it was just getting furnishings from the beginning and settling in and deciding, like, we've been going hectically for a while, but this is our long-term project, and kind of, I think of it as like restoring rather than renovating. Like, how can we preserve the original beauty of the place while still making it our own? Not that I know of. I think that we're not doing anything major, right? So we're doing fixing it up rather than, fundamentally changing the place. So theoretically permanently, but you never know when you move somewhere, right? But what's next is, well, learning Portuguese enough to actually have a conversation and not just be like ishta. And we do want to move towards citizenship because Brexit was a terrible thing. So we're both British citizens and thought of ourselves as Europeans. I first lived in Europe when I was 17 and have always wanted to live in mainland Europe. And so we do think that we'll be staying in Portugal. The question of whether we'll stay in Lisbon is another one. Kind of a long-term dream of living in the country, but honestly, like, I don't know if I could actually live outside of a city. I've lived in cities my entire adult life. And so, like, I love the cult. I love having access to art museums and to music and events and restaurants and the vibrancy of city. Essentially, just settling in, learning Portuguese, eventually going for citizenship, and then seeing what happens. Like, where do we end up? I don't know. I've learned over the course of my life not to make predictions. Like I said, this is the first time that we have chosen a country. And chosen a place to live because we wanted to be here. And so the idea is that this is probably our long-term settlement.